everyone. I got tagged by one of my members to a Facebook post. It was, I think it was a father whose son, they're local to the DFW area, whose son was competing. He's 16 years old, was competing in the adults. I think he was a blue belt competitor at a tournament in San Diego. What happened was he ended up getting his neck cranked pretty severely in a tournament, and he's in the hospital now, and I think he lost feeling in his body because it's a spinal injury. And I hate to hear about these stories because it on the one hand it does kind of make jiu-jitsu come out as dangerous. Like any sport, it doesn't matter if it's a contact sport, there's going to be danger in it. Even in non-contact sports, gymnastics, I mean, you think of the spills that these kids take. They can do the same thing. You can just time your jump or your flip wrong and end up landing on your head and cracking your neck. This wasn't quite that. The scenario wasn't quite that horrific. Like falling off of a balance beam, 8 feet, 9 feet in the air, and then landing on your head. It wasn't anything like that. So here's what happened. I'll quickly summarize. So the 16-year-old was playing guard, and his opponent stood up in his guard. The 16-year-old was actually he was locked on for a triangle, and when the opponent stood up, he had to release his legs a little bit, but still kept his ankles crossed, and he was going to switch to an armbar attempt. Anybody who does jiu-jitsu knows that when you're playing guard and somebody stands up, your hips are going to get elevated, and if the guy is tall enough, and if your legs are around his upper body up here rather than around his waist, which is guard, if it's around one shoulder and an arm because you're trying to take an arm, then what happens is you're going to be vertical upside down. If you keep that position, if you keep the lock on, when your opponent stands up, and if he stands straight up, you are now going to be vertical upside down with your head on the ground. Well, in this case, the opponent wasn't, I guess, a short opponent. The 16-year-old's head was a couple inches off of the ground. It was I guess, it was a pretty good attempt that he was going on the arm. So the other competitor wanted to get out of this position. So what he did was he did a maneuver where he tries to put both of his feet and close them. He didn't close them, but he tries to close them in front of the competitor, of the 16-year-old. So the 16-year-old's up here, his legs are around his opponent. So I'm upside down if I'm the 16-year-old, and the other guy tries to land and jump his legs in front of me so he can close his legs, lay down, and break the grip of my legs through extension. Well, so here's what happened. As the opponent tries to implement that defense, the 16-year-old's head hits the ground and his neck bends, right? It bends, so like this, so his head went like this, and he cracked his neck on the way down. If I looked in the comments, and I saw a lot of people were coming after the opponent, saying he did a pile driver on him, or he slammed him, like he was malicious in it. And I watched that video 10, maybe 15 times. I didn't see any malicious intent. I'm not in the guy's head, so I don't know exactly what he was thinking. But I didn't see any attempt by this guy to slam him. What I saw was an attempt to get out of the potential armbar that the 16-year-old was putting on him. Could this have been prevented? Well, yeah, two ways. One is for the opponent to have lost the match by submitting to the armbar, right? Because the guy had him pretty locked on and he was standing up in the air. But all of you who train know that you can get your arm hyperextended when a guy is upside down with his legs around you, even if you're standing up. That was one way that the injury could have been prevented, just simply tap and lose the match. The other way was if the 16-year-old had never let himself get put in that position in the first place. Now, what do I mean by that? If you're playing guard, you're on your back, right? So I'm assuming you know a little bit of jiu-jitsu. If you're playing guard, you're on your back and you're playing a closed guard, right? And you then transition to a triangle. Your legs are now closed, and the opponent stands up. So then you loosen up and you go for the arm. Your guard is still closed. As soon as my back gets lifted off the ground when he stands up, my hips are elevated, my back gets on my shoulder, upper shoulder gets off of the ground, let it go. You say to yourself, well, it's illegal for him to slam me according to the rule book. that is true. But what if he didn't slam you, right? I didn't see a slam in this. I have no dog in this fight. I don't know either one of those guys. But I didn't see a slam, so I didn't see any intent for the guy to slam him to get out of the submission. Why even chance it? Let it go, right? If you're good and your game is good, it doesn't matter what position you're in. You're going to win anyway, right? You don't need to take a risky position. Right? It became a risky position when the guy stood up. What's the rule? Always protect yourself. Are you protecting yourself if you let yourself get put into a vulnerable position? No, not at all. You know, sometimes in the heat of battle, in the heat of competition, you do something aggressive. You don't think, you just react, right? There was another tournament I saw. They probably were 10-year-olds, and they had just started. Ref said go, and one of the kids decides to, instead of doing, like a judo-style takedown where you have the gi here and you go for a throw or something, or try to get to a clinch and take him down, he decided to do what's called a guard jump. So he ran up to the other guy, opened legs and arms, and went to hug him. The other kid was ready for that. He had his base, so the kid who ran up, jumped, and put his legs around him, locked his legs, locked his arms. So he jumped guard on the kid. So what did the second one do? His reaction, because it happened so quick, his reaction was to go in, launch, and slam the other kid on the ground. So he slammed the other kid on the ground. Legs opened up, the kid was unconscious. Could it have been prevented? Yes. The second kid could have not slammed the kid and let this guy come and jump and do basically a koala bear hug on a tree with him, right? Or the first kid didn't do it. If he didn't do it, he wouldn't have gotten slammed and he wouldn't have been knocked out. Of course, the one who did the slam got disqualified, but at what cost to the first kid? First kid's unconscious, right? How good is that? I mean, that's a concussion right there. So although he won, he ended up with a concussion. I don't know. That doesn't make any sense to me. Does it make sense to you? Probably not. The same thing with this 16-year-old yesterday. He's holding this position. The guy stands up and he doesn't let it go. He wants that submission so bad because that's what they're conditioned to go for. It's just like, oh, you got it. Don't let it go. Don't let it go. Well, you have to let it go at some point for your own personal safety. Now, he's 16. He's young, right? So you can say he'll learn. But on the flip side of it is I hope he gets to learn from this mistake because that's a pretty bad injury. There's nobody to blame. It's a freak accident. It happened. And this kind of stuff does happen. You know, there's once a master who was on video and they're asking him about stuff like this. And he says, look, with our training partners, we want to not be malicious, of course. You know, you don't want to have any malicious partners. But at the same time, accidents happen. So it's every partner's job to help protect each other. But what is in his mind, what was the percentage of responsibility for protecting? So, me with my training partner, I have in his mind, I have 80% of the responsibility to protect myself. My partner has 20%. He's going to try to do stuff in a way that won't injure me, but at the same time, it really falls upon me to not get injured. It could be as simple as when I'm turning off to a side, I simply protect my face like this, even while we're grappling, because a knee can come, right? Maybe your opponent's on his knee and he turns, and when he turns, that knee moves, and what if my head is here and that knee moves right into my head, right? I have to protect myself in this case so that if the knee comes, it hits my arm, it doesn't hit my face. That's me taking responsibility to protect myself, and my partner is not intending to stick his knee in my face. It just happens. An accident will happen, but it's largely upon me to prevent that accident from happening by taking precautions. Same thing in competition. You need to not depend on the rule book as your protector and depend on yourself as your own protector. This is, as you can tell, I'm probably pretty passionate about this. I'm pretty animated about this because I hate seeing injuries. It doesn't work well for our art. It doesn't work well for being able to continue on because this is something that I think benefits everybody, and everybody should be learning jiu-jitsu. But if you don't treat it as something that's potentially dangerous, then you're bound to get these types of injuries. It's like, like with any weapon, right? If you're going to handle a firearm, you have to respect the fact that it can do potential harm. Same with jiu-jitsu. If you're going to do jiu-jitsu, you have to respect that you can be harmed by it, so you need to take precautions. If you take the precautions, then there's still going to be those freak accidents, and it's going to happen. And those are the times when you get injured. It just, like I said, I've said in other videos how many injuries I've had over the years. Most of my injuries happened my white belt time and my blue belt time. By the time I got my purple belt, actually I did have some injuries while I was purple belt. So white, blue, purple. The hope is that you last long enough to make it to black belt. A lot of times, I didn't have a lot of training on how to protect myself. A couple of times, there were a couple of things I did. So this whole thing about getting slammed. 1989, 1990, I was still at House School in Hawaii, and I remember I was playing guard on somebody, and this is a particular individual that we were very competitive. We would go after each other. Well, one time I'm playing guard, he stands up, and I go right, I have that choke, and I don't want to let that choke go. He stands up, I go right up with him, so I am now off the ground. And as soon as it happened, I get yelled at. I get yelled at by Helson. It's almost like he was just reaming me a new butthole. It was so animated and so I wouldn't say it was angry, but there was no doubt in anyone's mind that I was getting scolded big time. When we stopped, he says, "Don't ever do that again." And he told me what would happen. He says, because everybody knows Grandmaster Helson. With him, it's all about the street fight. So he says, look, and he goes and he has me do that to him. So he says, jump on me. So I jumped on him, and I had that choke in there. He says, okay. He goes, so you got the choke? I said, yes. I have 4 seconds to do something to you. And he starts walking over, and he puts me on the wall. It's a concrete wall. He said, now imagine if we're in a parking lot, and that's a car, or there's a pole coming out of a ground. And he says, and I slam you into the pole. I slam you into something. He goes, I can injure you so badly that whatever choke you're doing to me won't matter. And when he said that to me, it hit home. And from then on, I never did it again intentionally. And I say intentionally because there might have been that freak time here and there where I did it, but I caught myself and I let it go. And to this day, with our students, we always tell them, give up the guard, the closed guard. Don't play the closed guard if it means you're going to get lifted off the ground. Better to live to fight another battle, meaning another position, rather than have it potentially end right there. Now, in training, your partner's not going to slam you. But in a tournament, it could happen. In a street fight, it will probably happen. Count on it happening in a street fight. Now, if you're doing jiu-jitsu for the martial aspect of it, for the martial art, you need to think like this. If you're doing it for the competition side, less so, because like I said, an opponent doesn't want to get disqualified, but sometimes they just react. And when they just react and don't think, something unfortunate can happen. So this is getting a lot longer than I really wanted to, but this is an important thing that everyone needs to learn. And the sooner you learn it, the fewer that we will hear about these particular types of things. Now, as far as you being the guy getting choked and you standing up and the guy still holding on to the choke, being the koala on the tree, with you being the tree, I don't know what to tell you. I really don't. And that was one of my frustrations with competition, because it's so skewed in favor of the guy making the mistake. It's I don't know, maybe go petition your sanctioning bodies and tell them that if somebody gets picked up, then the person who's holding the triangle, holding the choke, holding the armbar needs to let it go, because these kind of accidents can continue to happen. Anyway, that's all I got. Be safe when training, guys. It's very important. Take care. Bye.